Well, is that a flash? Is that a flash? And I'm teaching enlightenment to myself. Yeah. Be sure and get. But do you guys always, before the night's over, get shots of the art? Well, you should. A fabulist's neural history of man. At first there was only lightning, then came thunder. Who, for the first time, made lightning aware of its own existence? Then, in a hard-to-explain manner, lightning's original existence was diminished. And all normal minds within hearing distance said, we don't get it. And even if we did, we wouldn't like it. And even if we did get it and thus didn't like it, we wouldn't believe it, since we'd be certain you just made it up. As Lyle left the house, he told them not to wait up on him, and they didn't. It's easy to fool the more conscious, because they don't care if you fool them or not. The Holy Grail doesn't rail or act at all pushy. Why don't you take those two and use them on your own thinking? As soon as Adam could speak, God cut his tongue out. Everyone's intelligence is inherited. A mystic abandons his legacy. A man once caught Moses alone and asked him, on this extraordinary expedition, how can one be assured of becoming a master and not merely a follower? And the desert mystic replied, never read. Moses added, then never listen to anything anyone has said. But I've already done that too, the man responded. Moses glanced down at his watch and said, I gotta go. Wherever there is time, there is a possibility of being late. Wherever there is thought, greater neural possibilities are precluded. A man dreamed that he found the special doctor he longed for and told him, I have this sore spot. And the doctor said, tell me more about it. And the man suddenly awoke and said, you're not the real doctor. Upon having the alarm clock awaken him in the middle of one, a man thought, the great thing about dreams is you don't have to go back and resolve or conclude them. He further reflected, not that much unlike normal thinking. A man said to a mystic, I have studied the words of all the great past masters, and as much as I receive from them, I must say that your personal present descriptions by far surpass them all. And the transient one replied, since we are standing here alive talking about it, were it not so, I would not be much of a mystic, now would I? After one of those everyday, inappropriate incidents, a guy in a whimsically apologetic manner said to his girlfriend, what did you ever do in a past life to deserve ending up with the likes of me? And immediately thought, hell, what did I ever do? As soon as Adam could walk, God busted his kneecaps. Local conditions continually adjusting themselves is man living and dying. Life continually adjusting itself is man thinking and rethinking. A certain man who had tried for many years to follow various mystical traditions and disciplines finally summed up his view of the whole affair with these words. All it is go out of town, come back, go out of town again, come back again, then go back out of town again, and like that. Note, our inspirational thought for the day has been canceled. Any opinion and all knowledge is inferior to understanding. And someone asked Muhammad, is that any opinion and all knowledge spelled A-N-Y and A-L-L? And he replied, yep. There was once a man who liked to sing, and he came to feel that he had derived the fullest possible pleasure only if he sang only songs that he had composed. He concurrently suspected that by performing only his own work, that he was assuring himself of a limited audience and success. But for a real singer, his own reward is the only reward. Consciousness sings. One man who had long yearned to achieve a certain thing decided that for his birthday he wanted someone to give him a poisonous snake he could use. Silly man, wasting a wish on something he already had. During the annual celebration of Saint Say What's Day, one monk wrote this note to the school's head. It said, "Can you tell me less? That is, can you tell me more regarding how I could benefit from you telling me less?" One man's motto became GNTTT, give no thought to thought, which he revealed to no one, since no one would understand, including his own mental conditions. Men came up with the idea of an extra systemic creative force, God, once they realized that their mind wasn't getting anywhere with the question otherwise. Looked back at from an advanced vista, it is both misinformative and understandable. And a man asked Confucius, "Is this the reason science will never discover the ultimate answer?" And the old one held up a photograph showing Snowfall's lack of parents. Everyone can excuse what they've done. A few even attempt to explain what they've done. But only the enlightened can understand what's happened. Addressing the question of behavior before that of understanding is the normal approach, but will not get you anywhere in the span of one lifetime. And someone asked a mystic, just how many lifetimes do we have? I said, just how many lifetimes do we have? I said, hey, are you listening to me? One man's poem. What hath life wrought? Life hath rotteth me. Rotteth me asking such questions as, what hath life wrought? Rot on life, rot on. His brother-in-law's related axiom, the tongue giveth and the tongue taketh away. Hey. Tonight's allegorical distinction: consciousness, the head; thought, head lice. The tensions and uncertainties man ascribes uniquely to himself are merely the mental interpretation of the ones common to all creatures. Kind of sheds a whole new light on it, don't it? Said Buddha's girlfriend as she reached over to turn off the clock radio. And finally, tonight's definition. Talking about awakening. Something you do till the awakening comes. And from the last time, there was one that was read, a news item that was incorrectly read. It went, the heading was, high school scholastic update. And the corrected version was, or is, life as normally led by men is little more than a science project. Well, at least I corrected it. Talking about the awakening, something to do till the awakening comes. It is easy enough, it is fair enough, and it is by and large useless enough to repeat the fact that the actual enlightenment, the awakening, etc., is not something you talk about, it's not even something you study, it's not something you think about, it's something that you do. Therefore, what the hell is it to talk about? And then you press on talking. I was going to pull out another view and some examples from the world that are not, any more than is ever the case, they're not for the purpose of me poking holes in reality, of me trying to pull up life's dress and laugh at it, of me showing how everyone else is stupid. But tonight I was going to try and grab a few examples that points right at the, if you'd like to call it difficulty, he would, the difficulty of ever trying to have the experience. Difficulty is just a word. But the man said it was a darn good word, which shows that he has really been around the block. The block. The block. The block. Oh. Two fairly separated examples. One we've mentioned before. I was going to use the world of jurisprudence and the world of natural science, the world of biology, the world of plants and jurisprudence. If we keep talking, then it's going to get to be, I said they were separate, there's going to be in somebody's mind some kind of growing closeness between the world of attorneys and, I won't say that. The world of jurisprudence and the world of biology. Jurisprudence, you recall we've pointed out, one reason it's so easy to make fun of attorneys throughout history, which is just trying to personalize and specify to make smaller examples of civilization itself. It's just that the law is a great example. It's, in some respects, better than religion, but it's just easier to poke at religion as an example. But anyway, back to jurisprudence. I've even tried to get you to consider the fact that part of the humor, part of the, well, humor / criticism, continuing of the law, an operation of the law. And I don't mean just in America circa 20th century, but throughout history. But the reason is that there is no end, there is no finality to the law. That is, how about this? We'll take the Ten Commandments, which we could also suggest the Ten Commandments can actually be brought down to one, but how many people have been impressed if Moses had come back from the hilltop, or Saloon, you all remember him, he was the original lawgiver. They never could pronounce his name correctly, I don't know why, but his real name was Saloon. He was the father of Western jurisprudence. I was afraid that'd be too inside, but evidently you people are becoming, better at Greek or judicial scholars, or else you just, this word saloon just brings out a laugh, which I don't even like to think about that possibility. At any rate, civilization, the way in which I've been using it, you understand, as always, it is tantamount to the stories of man being driven from a paradise. That is, of man reaching the level in his nervous system of consciousness, wherein he is no longer a naive, pristine creature of soul action. He is now a creature to varying degrees over the collective span and varying degrees within each individual case of being driven, directed, controlled, influenced by the intellect, words, or the silent realm of biological survival drives. Moses goes up, ideas of the Ten Commandments, all jurisprudence. The Ten Commandments were as much, at the time, I guess you can see, there was much civil law as they were religious, except he came by because life just simply grew in this way, in the civil manner, that they started out attributing all directives regarding behavior as being extra systemic in source. That is, God said that we shouldn't do so-and-so. Because no matter what a great public speaker you are, assuming Moses was one, no matter what a charismatic potential cult leader you were, if he says, all right, here's what we're going to do from now on. Don't covet your neighbor's wife. Do not covet your neighbor's gold. Do not, and he starts all this, and they listen and go, oh, who says? Because who says is always fair, because that is one verbal, one intellectual stuff above the bio-survival level. The questions never changed. It was back at the same time as Moses, if you'd like to look at 2000 BC, all the way up until somewhere approximately 1944 AD, wherein I believe someone pointed out to Stalin that he shouldn't let troops be running into the Vatican around the area because the Pope might take umbrage. And Stalin said, how many troops the Pope got? In case you people, the question's always been that. If Moses says, here's the Ten Commandments, they're very important, everybody went, okay. And so he told them all, and they got through. And of course, everybody wants to screw their wife's neighbor, their neighbor's wife, not their wife's neighbor. Everybody wants to steal their neighbor's ox, take his food. You want to lie against your neighbor? I mean, just you don't like him. Well, at any rate, all the Ten Commandments, the only reason that there was prohibitions is because people want to do them. You don't ever have 10 commandments that, thou shalt not rub salt into thine own wounds. Thou shalt not drink paint thinner on Thursday or on Sunday. The only prohibitions are things that people naturally want to do. So, Moses comes back with the 10 Commandments, goes away up on this hill, and all kinds of theatrics, comes back, and he says, here it is. And they listen. They go, okay, who says? And if he said, well, I said, you do know that has a very problematic lifespan. So it's always been, well, some extra systemic force told me this. God told me this. At any rate, it was still based upon this almost civil law. At any rate, it could have been one. We hadn't gotten to the subject yet, which I don't guess surprised anybody by now. One thing about doing your own material, you can also, you're your own warm-up act. I mean, I don't have to worry about hiring some, Smashing Pumpkins or Pop will lead itself to open up for me. You open up for yourself. All right, I'll put it to you another way. I'm not trying to compare, but look at all the big philosophical / mystical figures in history. They didn't have a warm-up act, which is what made them a singular figure. They just seemed to suddenly come out of the woodwork. And then it's after the fact. Somebody has to attribute if it's going to pass. If you're going to pass along, somebody has to finally say, well, Jesus wasn't as astounding as it was, and you can't figure out, it wouldn't even lasted until somebody said, you realize he was superhuman. And people go, I should have known that. Or Buddha was talking to people from outer space. They're the ones that brought him this. Oh, my shit. I was going to say that. It always has to be that after the fact. But at the time, the Buddhas and the Moses, they have no opening act. I'm just telling you, just between us, in case you're interested. If Moses may have come down and talked to everybody and said, here's the 10 Commandments. But either before or after, he got with a handful of buddies, and they had or they were drinking then. He said, listen, I'm going to tell them that this is from God. But don't anybody be upset. And if they had really been his kind of drinking buddies, the kind of people who understood anything, they understood immediately. He didn't have to give any great explanation. At any rate, it could have been one commandment. But at any rate, it comes down with 10 commandments. And what I was going to say is, in Rhode Island, the United States' smallest sovereign government, I haven't looked lately, but I assure you that the code, that is the criminal code, or the code, that is the laws of the state of Rhode Island, would now fill a fair-sized house trailer. Most states by now, they call it, the code is just a list of all the laws that are currently active and on the books, or at least were, anyway. Georgia, New York, those places, they run so much that just the books will cost $5,000 just to buy the books, just to list them. And we're talking about that it will fill up. That's what you see in attorney's office, a lot of it. It is easy to make fun of that, but we've been through what we're closing up the opening act. We're about to get into the stones are about to come on. I'm just pouting. Well, the thing about that, I didn't have the T-shirt concession for my own act. Cover something we've covered before, getting us up to date. The 10 Commandments cover everything. But as I said, one commandment would cover everything. And, which is like treat your neighbor as yourself, but it could be don't take that which is not yours, which covers absolutely everything. Everything. Because it springs from the biological, it springs from the bio-survival level that balances out the closed-in, or the parent closed-in ecological food chain / everything else chain on this planet. Is everything is balanced, and there is justice afoot, and man is the only one who apparently, who believes that he can interfere with such a balance. And so the one law, even put into words, the one commandment that would settle for anybody, Christians, Jews, Muslims, anybody, would be, don't take that which ain't yours, to make it sound more down home. Which includes everything. Obviously, don't take your neighbor's corn, don't take your neighbor's wife, don't take your neighbor's life. None of that's yours. Just don't take anything that's not yours. And if people were, if they could actually be driven from the pristine Garden of Eden, that is, from the silent, biologically survival-based world into the world of the intellect, into the world of civilization, and still hold the native sense of animal justice, then one law would have done. Moses would come back, Saloon would have come back, everybody would have come back and said, all right, here it is. One law, don't take that which ain't yours. Of course, I guess by now they would have said that which is not yours and made it sound really like they're making progress. But that's it. But at any rate, back to what seems to be the reality of it, 10 Commandments. These thousands and thousands pages of laws in every state. The 10 Commandments, and that's, the 10 was even an exaggeration. I mean, he had to pad it, if you go back and look at it. I mean, there was so much overlap. It was, besides just my one wouldn't have done. One law just won't do. You'd have to have at least 3, which is about all the 10 Commandments amount to. But anyway, the 10 Commandments, and that would seem to cover everything. And if you translate it just in a slightly, if you had to change the cultural contents a little bit, I assume you know that every Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, everybody in the world would go, yeah, you're right, that covers it. Those 10 Commandments, that's it. Put it in the context of our culture, our religion, and you're right, that's it. So why then do we have hundreds of thousands of laws? They are all the same 10 Commandments. Because of the fact that as soon as they do the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not steal. He reads them all out, Moses did. I assure you, before the night was over, some of the rougher elements there in his charge, in his hearing, they went off and had a few cheap drinks, and they began to discuss. We've been through this, and it's not just funny. And it's certainly not critical or sarcastic. I'm trying to get you to see is then, because the world of civilization is the world of words. The world of the law is the world of words. I've heard people attack it and saying, well, the laws or lawyers, it's nothing but yak, 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 yak. Yeah. But so what? So is religion. Well, so science. Well, so is man's world of the intellect. Is yak, 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 yak. They went away after hearing the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not steal. And some of the guys had been thieves, that was their gig. They went off and had a few drinks and going, uh-oh, we are out of business. We're going to have to get a job. And then one of them thinks, no, wait a minute. And he says, you know, when we were over in Egypt, they had a thing, you remember they were doing that bookkeeping thing where you'd bring in grain and you'd leave it with one guy like a banker. Did you know that there was a guy over there that they were doing things, they called it cooking the books.
Yeah.
They were stealing on paper. They were stealing by writing on the papyrus. They didn't have to actually come steal your corn. You'd leave your corn over there to be taken care of, and then you'd swap it for another guy would show up with, he had extra sheet and you had extra corn. Fraud. Bunko. That's always been. So then, surely you can see it. So they do that for a while. 2 or 3 months later, 2 or 3 years later, it just keeps on. People pressing Moses like, you know, the laws were good that you came down, those 10 Commandments. But you realize we got people doing stuff, and they claim that it's not, you said thou shalt not steal. And we've always called stealing when you go up and physically take somebody's property. And most say, yeah, I knew that. And he said, would you realize now the kind of people that we're leaving our stuff with? When we've got extra wheat or something, we leave it with a guy, and then he'll swap it when some of these other tribes come by and swap it for extra sheep and stuff, yeah? Do you realize that those guys are now shortchanging us? That they're doing white-collar fraud. He's going, yeah, so they explain it to him. And as sharp as he was, it didn't take him a second, he realized. So he went, okay. So then he has to say, whatever the 10, thou shalt not steal, I don't know, 3rd commandment. Then he has to do, this is the way the law works. There'll be, under thou shalt not steal, then they have to do paragraph 2, subsection 1. Steal shall henceforth from this day on include, colon, and then it will describe what fraud is, what cooking the books are, what is paper theft. And then somebody says, wait a minute. And then steal, somebody points out. Do you realize if you break into somebody's house according to the Egyptians or according to the Lebanese or the Arabs or whoever else was around, the Canaanites, do you realize if you go at night, you know, they call stealing that you actually get with somebody in their presence, that they see you steal it. And you come grab your neighbor's wife or his corn, they go, yeah. And they say, how about this? What if you wait till it's dark or they're out of town? But how about if you wait till it's dark? They're in bed and you'll go over there and get it. And they don't even actually see it. Now that is not stealing. Which in the West, British English common law, then they had to come up with one that's known as robbery. Burglary, I guess it is technically, that you actually, in secret, with no one's knowledge, that you break in and you take it but no one sees you. So technically, they decided that, all right, now Moses, that is not stealing. So he listened to that for a while. It goes on for X number. So all right, here we go again. Commandment 3, thou shalt not steal. Paragraph 2, henceforth, steal shall also include, colon, and then they describe burglary. But then they end up having to do shoplifting. Then they have to, you understand, it just goes on and on, because what it amounts to, in a sense, is that people finding a loophole. And you can never plug them all, which, if men could learn anything from that which is right in front of their face, which I'm trying to get to in a minute with the idea of plant life as opposed to, or in contradistinction, in fact, holding hands and skipping with, jurisprudence. But if men could see that which is right in front of their face, instead of making fun of, being critical, but making fun, laughing at attorneys or the whole idea of the law, like what a waste of time. We had 10 commandments 5,000 years ago, and now we've got 10,000 commandments, and people are still breaking the law. And they normally will laugh at the institution. That is, normally laugh at what man has intellectually attempted to do to counteract the behavior he doesn't like, which is what civilization is in large part about. Religion, the law, and all is to take the very things that men would do naturally at the biological survival level, that they would do naturally, and interfere with it, control it, contain it, redirect it, put certain limits on it. But it is a running battle. It is the boy at the dike, and he'll never get enough fingers. I mean, you plug up one hole in the dike, and I know it's going to go. But it is not a flaw. All it shows is that life is alive. And in some particular area. And also, if any of you, I pointed this out, if you'd like to consider one more time, it is easy, for instance, and this is not politics, as you know, any more than I'm actually talking about the law, but I'm going to point out what happens in the physical world that is exemplary and that people do not learn from. It has been a cry ever since Moses, ever since Confucius, that civilization, even when people are coming together, decent, civilized, thinking, good-natured, men of goodwill, that they'll get together, and still in their midst will always be those wrecking, with the potential to wreak havoc, those who will steal, those who will break the commandments, those who will look for a way out, a loophole. There are instances, and they're always crying where we do not treat them harshly enough, that those of us who are civilized do not treat the uncivilized, the criminals, harshly enough. Notice this, there are periods, it happens constantly, and there's some right now, wherein it is safe to go out and walk down the street. But they are places that are always, to use political terminology, they always are those of a one-man tyrannical rule, a police state, as it's normally called. Reminding you, you may be listening with fairly new ears, this has nothing to do, our interest has nothing to do with politics and etc. But I'm giving you examples that are right there in man's face for thousands of years. It is safer, someone can point out, that it is safer right now to walk down the streets of, let's see where, Kuwait City, than it is New York City. That you can leave your car unlocked. You can leave your wife at home with the door unlocked. And nobody's going to rape her. Nobody's going to steal your car. But if you happen to be out on the street late at night, for who knows what reason, you're kind of dazed and you wake up and you forget what time it is and you walk on the street and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, you kind of walk outside and you stumble up against somebody else's car, you're not even sure where you are. You're inclined, there is the possibility that you will be shot on the spot. Which you can say is unfair, but from all your neighbor's view, it's like, well, it shows it's still safe to leave my car unlocked because our poor old neighbor, it just turned out he stumbled outside, he had a mini stroke and stumbled outside and was close to my car and the police shot him. I mean, I hate it, but at least it makes me feel good to know my car is still safe. You understand? That you can, in a local area, create an absolutely, well, relatively speaking, a safe condition. But what I want you to understand is that would be the place that a tyrant, and I don't mean to use Kuwait City for anybody watching me that's going to write and complain. Moscow 10 years ago. Beijing 5 years ago. But a place that has a one-man tyrannical rule, which those are still not good examples. Where's Big Daddy Amin when you need him, as an example? A kind of place, some little place that has one man, some madman. He may have 10 commandments. He may have 10 laws, or he may just have one, which is always operationally, de facto always is one when you've got just a one-man rule, and that is whatever I say right now is the rule, that's the rule. Now he can apparently, if he's trying to impress the foreign press or something, try and say, well, let's pass a new constitution and get his brother-in-law or some other couple of guys to draw up some kind of makeshift constitution. He can say, well, here are the laws. In other words, here's my 10 commandments. But everyone with any intelligence knows that those 10 commandments can be changed just like that. If he turns around and he says, grab that man. And they go, wait a minute, there's a law that says you can't grab a man without certain due process. And he looks at whoever said that like, do you want to go with him? And they all grab him. That's the kind of place that would be safe, but the point I was getting at, now I get into it strictly allegorically, I'm comparing the areas wherein it seems as though that it's just a constant battle almost between chaos, between anarchy and stability, between civilization and just rioting, which is the kind of places where you've got 10,000 laws. And that's the same area that a social critic can go, well, what's happened to us? We came and enforced the laws we got, and now we got these idiots here in our Congress or somewhere passing more laws. All right, the other alternative, in a normal world, in normal reality of a three-dimensional world run by polarized energy, is to be over in a place where there's a one-man rule, and he says, we got an up-to-date, tyrannical madman Moses. And he says, all right, here's the 10 commandments. And there's no fooling around. There's not even any trials. If somebody sees you steal, you're dead. I mean, don't worry about an appeal or hiring an attorney. I'll save you a lot of money. You don't need an attorney. You're dead. Somebody catch you with their wife, they can shoot you. with their wives. They can shoot you. If not, point them out to me and I'll have them shot. And you can say, well, no, that's a good place to live. Now, beyond the personal social consequences and restraints, something else I want to point out. That organism, that community, that nation, whatever we're talking about, is short-lived. It will not survive because it's too rigid. You got to work on several levels of allegory now, and then move past that last level of allegory and realize I'm still talking about life itself. It's just ordinary minds have to think, wait a minute, this is a political problem. I'm talking about life as it is. Life cannot be normally looked at, much less described. But when you have what appears to be a political structure that is that safe, it will be so rigid that it's just a matter, I'm talking about very short-lived, it normally does not even survive one lifetime. Because when you have a place that safe, that we don't have 10,000 laws. Does everybody understand the point of this? Because it's not. Let me pick out a fictitious little nation somewhere. It's gone to the point that, and this goes on throughout history, it's going on right now, that the country seemed to have just, whoever's about to overthrow it, some general, they're about to stage a coup. And his story is, just the hour, the minutes before he does it, maybe to would-be followers, maybe he grabs hold of some of the press and he says, I'm about to overthrow the president. Because the point is, look at it. It is dangerous for our wives to be in the street. When he took office 10 years ago, I counted them, we had 3,200 laws on the books to govern our people. We now, well, him and all of his cronies, we now have 14,000 laws. Crime is up. You cannot trust anybody. It's just unsafe to live here. I am about to do something about that for our own good. So you understand, and he says it's become bloated. It's become nothing but a kind of bureaucratic nightmare. It's become nothing but a political animal that is untamable. It is harmless. We have got to have safety. So he goes in, stages a coup, he takes over, and of course the first thing he does, he dismisses whatever legislature they have, probably the courts. He just says, that's all over. Until we get around, until further notice, that's done for, I am in charge. And the laws are no longer applicable. Just burn them. Take out the books. Throw the judges, make them go, put them in prison or throw them out in work gangs. And take the attorneys, run them off if we got any. But the laws, you might as well burn our law library because those laws are done for. They're just gone. We're going to start from ground zero. And he may say, nobody out after 5 p.m. at night, nobody out of your neighborhood. Anyway, he just says 2 or 3 things which amounts to whatever I say goes. Now, that can become safe, but it will barely live. He'll be lucky to last, as you should know your history. One more time, this is not political. It has to do with the nature of life itself must be dynamic. And for life to be dynamic, it never comes to any, to ordinary minds, it never comes to any resolution. That we keep passing laws and laws and laws when the 10 Commandments didn't work. And now we've got 10,000 commandments, right? You're right, it doesn't work from their view. But it can work. You can have one law. You have one guy in charge, and it goes on this back and forth, this cycle. You can have one law, and it will be safe. But it is so rigid that life will die there. Which is why it will not survive. It certainly will not survive him. Tyrants never have heirs. One party rule, one man rule. Because it's all one man can do to hold on until he dies. And it's not because of political pressure. It's not because it is simply life must be dynamic. Life must be loose. And from ordinary views, it is so loose that ordinary minds think the damn thing's coming apart. Yeah. All right. It must be that way. That is the way it is. There's nothing, back to the judicial example, there's nothing amiss that man cannot pass laws to stop crime. Let's make it the easy way. When I point out, you could stop crime. The one-party rule or the stuff like now, of course they try it. It's still, there's situation is still in existence in semi-civilized countries in the world right now. Parts of the Middle East are still living by the strict Islamic law, as they call it, whereby they catch you engaged in theft and you're found guilty by some court of law, they take you out and cut your hand off. You found guilty a second time of theft, they cut off both hands. And theft per capita, my understanding by all statistics, is a lot less than in Fort Lee, New Jersey. So, you could say, all right, let's move back to Fort Lee, New Jersey, and say, well, the crime rate here is horrible. And so the mayor or the governor of New Jersey could say, well, here's what we're going to do. I keep hearing this new idea. Instead of just this kind of endless in and out of the judicial system and prisoners and our jails, what we're going to do is 3 strikes and you're out. That if you're convicted of 3 felonies, you are going to jail, the 3rd conviction, and no parole. Of course, then somebody more and more complains now, wait a minute, big deal. It cost us $2 million to keep the average prisoner in there. That's going to be, my share is like $75 before he dies. No, I don't like that idea. He's the one who mistreated me. I don't pay $75, just my share to keep him up. Notice, we could, forget this 3 strikes and you're out. You could make it a quite simple one. If you wanted to just directly cut down crime, and that is, if you're convicted of one felony, you're dead. We execute you. Not as crude. We won't take you out like some of the Middle Eastern countries and chop your head off. We'll still do it the way that God intended, the good civilized way, the old Sparky, as they call it here. So the electric chair here in Georgia has its own name, Old Sparky, for those of you who don't know. Shows there can be a little humor under the most adverse of circumstances. Of course, that's not the first one. Supposedly somebody, one of the first or second clients of Professor Guillotine, who invented the thing, is once he laid down his head and it was his turn to go, he said, like a barber, he said, just a little off the back here. At any rate, you could simply say, in a civilized way, we're still going to have hanging, electrocution, or gas chamber, but convicted of one felony, you're executed. You don't have to build more prisons, you cut down. But notice, you do not do that. But also notice the parts, I don't mean to just point out extreme so-called right-wing conservative fanatics hollering about, well, we should execute everybody. Yeah, string them all up. There's parts of everybody's nervous system, including the most so-called liberal in his nervous system somewhere. If it gets close enough that one of his family members or somebody is murdered in a holdup or raped or something, and he thinks, it'll go through his nervous system. Having nothing to do with him personally, we're about talking about the dynamics of life itself, but of thinking, well, screw them, I'd kill him. And then the more you're wired up that way, you kind of shudder and go, oh, I wouldn't do that. Shame on me thinking that. But sure you would. That's not important. But the point I want you to see is that life is not amiss by a man not being able to, quote, solve the crime problem. And specifically of laughing or scoffing or criticizing and thinking something's wrong with the fact that, wait a minute, crime, if we would live by the 10 Commandments, God damn it, says a good Christian. Of course, then I guess you go, uh-oh. By God, if we could live just by the 10 Commandments, we wouldn't have crime. We wouldn't even need prisons. We wouldn't be having this discussion, right? And look at us, we've got 10,000 laws and we're no better off. From his view, yeah, right. And he'd go, well, what good's the law? It shows that that locale, wherever it is alive because it cannot stop crime. To use this example, which is to say what? It cannot stop growth. And all the minds within hearing distance went, we don't like that. And even if we did, we wouldn't believe it. Into plant life, I was going to give you another example that is right into, fairly common, and I don't have to put even my 20 minutes worth of little slight nudges and pushes. I'm going to take just what you can find on any National Geographic special almost 2 or 3 times a year. It's an old story. It's an accepted scientific fact, so see, I can put it out there with the best of them. They find an island somewhere on which, through the grace of a shipborne extrinsic insect brought onto the island, some local plant, some local tree that has flourished, as far as everybody remembers, is suddenly on the verge of extinction, being ravished by this non-indigenous insect. You understand? In other words, there's some little island somewhere that has this particular tree, these plants, and just doing quite fine. And then for the first time, Captain Bligh comes by. The love boat comes in. They are visited. This goes on all the time. It's not just islands, as some of you may know. Florida, well, every part of the world now, since the world's becoming, as they say, such a smaller place. But let's take the island. It sounds better. A little isolated place. And a ship comes by, and it's no secret. I'm just now taking the kinds of things that are accepted scientific reality. And they suddenly notice that some important plant, maybe the central diet of the, anyway, some plant here is now beginning to show sign, just being ravaged, and at first they don't know why, and then they realize, wait a minute, and they find this bug, and they realize that this particular insect, anyway, they can establish, somebody realizes this is not an indigenous insect. We recognize what this is, and it came from over, and they think, well, they point to Madagascar. It was that ship that came by here that had stopped in Portugal and Brazil. And look at that. They will then state that it is obvious that the plant, this particular plant or tree, has not yet had time to develop the kind of toxic repellent to defend itself from this new enemy, this new insect, which is feeding off of its leaves. That is stated as nothing new. It is stated just as an absolute scientific fact, just reality. The tacit part being, if they don't point it out anyway, but the tacit part being that, and they do, I'm just using their descriptions. They have already had many, many instances, enough that it's taken as scientific fact that plants do develop. Not necessarily all of them. If they don't, they become dinosaur plants. But that they will, when attacked by a new species of insect, that they will, or they can, in many cases do, over a period of time, develop some sort of new enzyme that repels that particular insect, this new one. You understand that? That's probably everybody read something like that in high school where you notice, but it is an accepted fact. Just that's the way it goes. It may not, or it may take it so long to develop this that that particular species of plant on the island may be wiped out before it develops. Because the plants do not. They're not like humans. They do not suddenly go, wait a minute, this insect's eating on me, I'll go buy a can of Raid or I'll slap it. A plant works at obviously some different tempo. So it takes it a while to develop. It may succeed or it may not. It may develop it so slowly that it may be wiped out before it can. But in cases they got plenty of them, they realize that the plant will develop over a period of time a new enzyme, develop its own new defense against this specific bug. It already had some. They will already point out that it was obviously already putting out, and they've got names they can measure. They know what they are, certain poisonous, certain toxic repellents that already protect it from there on the island, and they can name 4 or 5 bugs that really would normally, they say, be eating on it. Or they figured it would, but it's obvious that there is something naturally now in the plant, in the tree, that is toxin and repellent to these 5 or 6 bugs. But now this new one just falls on it and just has a feast. And they just treat the plant like, we don't know whether it's going to survive long enough to, as a species to develop a repellent or not. But they know that plenty of them have. And then they move on to something else. And now let's examine the ecology of the reef system here on Island X. Wait a minute. Notice, as scientific as they are, they never even stop. And this is not the point yet. We've only got 5 or 6 minutes to make the point. But they never go, wait a minute. Plants don't have intelligence. You mean that tree? And they're already treating. I'm doing a fair quote of the kind of things they say, that science, those studying the problem, have not yet, or have insufficient information. They cannot tell yet whether this plant, this tree as a species, has sufficient time left based upon the rate at which it is now being decimated by this newly introduced insect. They are not yet certain, based upon the best statistical information and theorization, whether it will survive long enough to actually develop a repellent so as to regain its foothold here and flourish again. Then they move on. The rest of the show. Are they, now we're talking about now, not mystics, not science, not religious people, not any sort of run-of-the-mill nut. We're talking about, in our day and time, from an ordinary view, most people's idea of shamans, scientists, men of facts, information. Those people are saying that trees have intelligence, aren't they? But are they saying, now I'm going to play both parts right quick, are they saying that trees are sitting around out there or standing around out there going, wait a minute, what am I going to, this bug's eating me up. And it looks over and it sees its mother, its grandmother, already just falling to pieces. And they look at it and realize, well, it's that damn bug, the one that's eating on me. That's killed my mother. You can't treat my mama that way. I'll develop a poison. If we tried to talk to a scientist and I said, is that what you're saying? Now, you know they'd laugh at me. And I'd say, well, I only think of one more immediate possibility, and it's not scientific. And they go, well, what? Religious? Well, God's at work. And they go, oh, no, come on. Well, what would you suggest, sir? What's the other possibility? You've already stated the fact that plants do develop, over a period of time, new enzymes. They produce something new in themselves to help protect themselves. And you're telling me that they don't sit around and think about it, and they discuss it, and they've got a lab somewhere that we don't see at night when everybody goes to sleep. The trees go off, and they got this midnight lab, and they're working on some kind of new enzyme, or they're trying to figure some kind of spray to pull themselves and repel it. No. Well, how do they do it? Then you mean it's God, some kind of extra systemic force outside that looks at it and thinks, oh, those poor old trees, they don't deserve this. Neither explanation will fit. What's the one thing that men can never see, that ordinary minds can never see? And I'm going to do it. It's working out. Fortunately, they will all come to a head here at the end of the tape, but we're back to the fact that here is something so blatant, so blunt, so in your face that it can't be seen. But I want you to try and consider tonight from another view why it can't be seen. All right, here's what can't be seen. I'll go ahead and put it in words. And I've done it plenty of times before, and that is that life is alive. We're not talking about an island somewhere. We're not talking about an island anywhere. Not if you understand anything. Not if you were awakened to some other non-standard level of consciousness or position of consciousness. Life is alive as an organism, not theoretical, not in some dreamy, wishful state. Now, I'm not speaking of nature, as it's normally referred to in times like this. I'm talking about life itself is alive. And where are we? Now, it's obvious where the trees are. Well, yeah, they're part of life. The insect, yeah, the insect. The island itself, yeah. Portugal, where the insect came from, yeah. The whole thing here is that's just part of life. Well, yeah. So what's driving this tree to make a change? What's driving this tree to something down there close to approaching intelligence? Well, we've already pointed out that it can't be intelligence. That is, scientifically it can't be intelligence. And the scientists went, well, no. And we point out it's not God. Well, no. Well, what is it? Anything within a living system. Now tonight I just threw in system. I didn't put in the modifier, but I want you to understand. Anything in a living system, inside it, cannot conceive of what the system is. There is no answer from an ordinary position. That is an ordinary position of intelligence. For a scientist, a religious person, anybody, at that ordinary position inside a system, consider that I'm talking about our universe. It is alive. Inside that, from any ordinary position, to try and look around and to come up with any conception. I'm not talking about theory. I'm talking about actual understanding. When I say conception, actual understanding it, seeing something. There's no way to do it. There is no answer to say, well, how in the world, or what in the world, how does a tree, a dumb tree, a tree, no brain, they don't have enough sense to get in and out of the rain, as philosophers in Arkansas would say. How can a tree develop, there it sits, and suddenly attacked by something it never expected, something absolutely foreign to that island? Which every time people do things like foreign, how could people come into our neighborhood and kill us? How could people come into our country? It's all this foreign stuff. Where'd it come from? I mean, of course you always go, well, out there somewhere, across the border, across town. There's no out there. But apparently this tree is now suffering because something is getting to it that came from out there. But the damn thing, oftentimes, or those damn things will develop a defense. How? And you cannot say that trees have intelligence. I'm using ordinary scientific position. You cannot say trees have intelligence, no. And you can't say, well, God is directing them to do it. Nah, we're not going to say that. Life is alive. Life continually readjusts itself. Life can have in one locale, it says, here's the 10 Commandments to live by, over here. And over here, it has all these people that go, wait a minute, that third commandment says steal, but if you just do it on paper, if you don't actually take their possession, if you just defraud them on paper, that's not stealing. And then over here life says, all right, Commandment 3, paragraph 2, subsection A. And then they go, wait a minute, that doesn't include robbery, burglary. That is alive. It is alive whether a tree can develop a brand new enzyme that will repel a certain, apparently, exotic pest. There's no exotic pest. Well, anyway, back to the real point tonight. There is no out there. There's no doubt that the tree is being attacked and could be, as a species, destroyed, wiped out by this pest. But then people, the way the ordinary mind works, it must separate everything. It must be preferential in its thought that, well, the pest came from out there, and either the tree is going to have to, right here where it is, develop a repellent, a defense mechanism, or it will go. It will die. It will just disappear. Where will it go? Well, we don't talk about such as that. I mean, you're trying to be metaphysical. It just dies and goes in the ground. Again, I say the truth is right in your face. It's everywhere. There's nowhere to look. Except from any ordinary position, you cannot see that life's alive. From any ordinary conscious position within a system, it doesn't matter what you do, there is no way to see what the system is. It is an impossibility. The so-called awakening enlightenment is you have shifted your inherited position. But it's still, it is damn near a scientific fact in the metaphysical world that inside of a system, no part can see what the system is. Of course, if that were literally true, none of this would be possible. That's why I said from any ordinary position. Everybody's intelligence, everybody's consciousness is inherited. The only way that you can ever make use of consciousness is you're going to have to abandon your legacy. Has a different meaning. I mean, somebody go breaking the gringos' cars. That's what happens when you're your own warm-up act. You're fired. There was once a mystic who, for a price, would tell you everything he knew. And for double the price, he wouldn't tell you anything. Sister version. There was once a man interested in the mystical quest who, for any price he could afford, would seek out, listen to, and consider anything that anybody had to say on the matter. Then when he finally realized what this is actually all about, he'd pay any price to keep from doing so. Knowing a little bit won't help. The mind can get parts of it, but never the whole. One guy cried out, "Turn me loose, turn me loose." And someone asked, "Are you going to fight him?" "No," he replied, "fighting him will do no good. Just turn me loose." The mystic of Queensborough remarked, "It certainly was easier being an adolescent seeker back when you still believed there was somewhere to go and something to overcome." And the mere mention of this drove one man near wild. As he trooped along on the journey, one man began to replace personal possessive pronouns with impersonal articles. He says it works just as well, plus makes him feel much less embarrassed when engaged in nude public conversation and thinking. The routine reporting of news consists mainly in telling people that things are getting worse when they didn't think it was possible. A man said to himself, "If my brain is the anchor desk and my mind the newscaster,